I want to introduce Theo Block. She is a student from UVA, and as a student she has done an excellent job. She put together a whole campaign in 3 months, and we are always hesitant to invite the students to be part of a panel because the students are learning. But Theo has shown so much interest, so much passion, and a lot of skills, and she put together a paper which is driver license for all, a campaign proposal for Virginia. So thank you, Theo. She has to stop. She stopped going to school today to come here. She goes to school in Charlottesville in UVA, but now she's with us. So welcome. So we are going to begin with Valerie, right? So let's begin the discussion. And thank you, everybody.
Interested in this issue as a public defender because a lot of times my clients would, I started noticing this was happening. I was a public defender starting in 2006, and this didn't happen in 2006, but over the years it started to sort of build, and I started noticing it happening more. And that was my clients who were undocumented, something was happening to them, and it was different from what was happening to my other clients. And what I noticed was that the jail was suddenly holding on to my clients when they were charged with driving without a license, which in Virginia is a very minor charge. So I'm going to go over the law just a little bit in Virginia, just sort of to give you some context. So in Virginia, you need to have a driver's license in order to drive. If you're not documented, and even sometimes if you are documented, you cannot get a driver's license in Virginia. They make it pretty hard. So a lot of people need to get somewhere, and so they take the chance and they drive without a license, as many of you know. And then, of course, they get stopped. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why they might get stopped. It might be a legitimate stop. It might be a pretextual stop. Pretextual stop is when somebody gets stopped by the police, and the police give what seems to be a valid reason, but that's not really the reason why they stop them. So I'm sure you all know what that's about. But anyway, whether it's legitimate or not legitimate, the person gets stopped, and of course, they don't have a driver's license. Most of the time, if somebody's driving without a license, they get what's called a summons. We usually call it a ticket or a citation. The person signs it, and they go off on their way. With a misdemeanor, a minor misdemeanor like that, the police officer has discretion whether to charge it as a summons or charge it as a warrant. Now, a summons, you get the piece of paper and you go on your way. With a warrant, you actually get taken to the police station or the jail and go before a magistrate and get arrested. If they can't, the discretion that the officer has to give a summons versus a warrant depends on whether the officer believes that person will actually show up in court. So if they don't believe the person will actually show up in court, then they give a warrant. Well, if the person doesn't have any idea at all, and they don't have an address for that person, and they can't ascertain how are we going to find this person if they don't show up to court, then they're more likely to give a warrant. So I started noticing that clients that ordinarily would get a summons and come to court and either have a trial or work something out were suddenly being taken into jail, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. Now, at the same time that this was happening, and I was noticing this, a case was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, Padilla versus Kentucky. And that case said that a criminal defense attorney also has a duty to give their client some immigration law advice having to do with whether they were likely to be deported or there would be other immigration consequences based upon their criminal conviction. Immigration law is a very, very thorny, specialized area of law. And most criminal defense attorneys don't really know very much about immigration law. It changes all the time. It's federal law, whereas most criminal defense attorneys are focused on state law. So it's a very difficult thing to understand. But because of these two things happening at once, I started going to a lot of trainings on immigration law and the criminal consequences of immigration law on people who may be non-citizens, may be here legally or may be here illegally. The other thing that happens to people is if they have a temporary work permit, their driver's license is only good for as long as their temporary work permit is in effect. If the temporary work permit runs out, their driver's license runs out too. Now, they may be in the process of doing the paperwork to get their work permit renewed, but then suddenly they're driving without a license. So even people who are here legally end up being caught in this net. Now, Teo has done a lot of research into the pieces that happen, the statistics that happen, the pieces that happen through all of this. So I'll let you sort of take the next piece.
Thank you guys for coming. So I'm at UVA Law, and I spent my summer interning with Legal Aid Justice Center and working with Edgar on this campaign. And so I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the problem, where the source of the problem, the laws. I'm sure most of you are familiar with actually Virginia has a very contentious issue on this topic, and so I'll be brief about that. You can ask questions afterwards, and then I'm gonna give 3 reasons why now is the time to act on this issue. So I spent a lot of time on this, and I really believe that we have to act on this issue now. And those 3 reasons involve the impact on immigrant communities, which extends due to what we've kind of discovered by how these laws are implicated in immigration enforcement. And then also the compelling public safety and economic and law enforcement arguments that have actually really been, a lot of research has been developed in the past couple of years, and I'll explain why and what that reveals. And then I'm going to talk about a recent nationwide shift in policy that has happened since January 2013. That is remarkable and that we really should take advantage of. So to begin with, I have, in your folder you have some slides. The first page is just to go away with. It's a bunch of facts and numbers, because I found that people really are persuaded by these, but I'm not going to go over this. You have this with you. You can look over it. You know. Oh, you guys don't have it in the red folder. No. Yeah. So this is just so that way when you guys leave, you have some facts and some numbers to go off. But I mean, they're very consistent. We don't need to go over the details. On the second slide, you'll see a timeline for Virginia license. This is really brief, really quick. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but in case you don't know, it's important to understand the context in Virginia for what's going on. This is a hostile environment, and I'm proposing to move on this campaign even despite this history, and I'll explain that. But first, we should know what we're up against. So with September 11th, the 9/11 Commission revealed that 8 of the hijackers had Virginia DMV issued IDs. Actually, those IDs were ascertained through fraud of proof of residency, but rather than increasing that requirement, in 2003, Virginia was the first of what would become many, many states, in fact, all of them but 3, to start requiring proof of legal presence to issue driver's licenses. And then in 2010, as I'm sure many of you remember, there was a tragic accident in which an immigrant caused a drunk driving accident that killed nuns. Now, he actually didn't have a valid driver's license at the time, but he did have a valid Virginia identification card. And he had an EAD. He actually was, he had deportation proceedings pending against him, but clearly his behavior had nothing to do with his status, and he wasn't even licensed. But regardless, this was taken up by a lot of anti-immigrant advocates, as well as some law enforcement who were very, very upset in Prince William, and they put pressure on the governor to order the DMV to change their policy and stop accepting the EAD, or the employment authorization document, a work permit, as proof of legal presence. This impacted many legal immigrants with proof of legal presence that were no longer able to, well, for people with TPS, temporary protected status, there's around 20,000 or so immigrants in Virginia with that status. They were required to provide a different form of proof, which was difficult, and with administrative difficulties, many had trouble getting their driver's licenses renewed. And then people with withholding of removal status, that's refugees, they cannot, that is proof of legal status in federal regulations. So you can see how depriving these people of access to driver's license is problematic. So this is the history. So we see that this is a tough environment. There's been a lot of anti-immigrant advocacy in this area on this issue with driver's licenses. So why should we move on this issue? Why should immigrant advocates focus their time and their energy on this? And I'm going to give 3 reasons. The first is something that I discovered when talking to Valerie. So I started off by, you'll see this, driving without a license, how it can lead to deportation. I found in my research that it's actually the main way that a lot of immigrants are being deported. So I'm sure you guys all know about the record numbers of deportations in the recent years. I mean, 1,000 people a day, more than 50% of which were deported for either had no convictions whatsoever or traffic offenses on their record. So people are being deported for nothing. How are they coming into contact with the federal immigration authorities? how is this happening? I mean, these are people innocent, just driving their kids to school, going to work. How are they getting contact? So, you know, with Valerie's help and through some research, I was looking at the different interactions. So you have this to go home with, and you can check this out. But there are federal information sharing programs. There's things related to how jails and prisons are actually getting signing agreements where they have financial incentives to inform ICE of any immigrant without proof of legal presence who comes into contact with the jail. And there's secure communities, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which is a fingerprinting and information sharing agreement between the federal government and local government. So it is important. It impacts immigrants everywhere, all the time, just in their everyday life. That is the way that most immigrants, just in their everyday life, are made most vulnerable to coming into contact with immigration authorities. So then on the next slide. So the next reason I think we need to move on this is because actually, so I mentioned that Virginia was the first of what would become the majority of the states to start requiring proof of legal presence. So that was 10 years ago. And the thing is, why now is the time to act is because in the past 10 years, we've been able to actually, there's been a lot of data collected that can now be analyzed to reveal the negative consequences of denying immigrants access to driver's licenses in many ways. So there have been lots of reports done either at the national or state level, and we can come to several conclusions with a lot of support in data. For one, public safety. This is a public safety issue. There have been national studies done by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, which found that unlicensed drivers are significantly more likely to cause a fatal accident. Then the California DMV just last year had collected data for years and found that found similarly very disturbing statistics. In fact, worse. And then there was also findings that even passing basic exams or driving tests improves driver safety significantly. So that's one body. There's also the impact on insurance rates. So you know, on that first sheet that has all these statistics, you can look at some of the insurance rates. It's millions of dollars. And for insured drivers, the cost of having unlicensed drivers on the road for their premium can be a couple $100 a year, maybe more. Depends. We have calculations from different areas, but for insurance companies, this is expensive and undesirable. I mean, they're paying. For example, we have research by the Insurance Research Council revealing that insurance companies were paying $41 billion in insurance losses per year. I mean, this is a costly and dangerous consequence of depriving people we share the roads with, we share our communities with, access to driver's license and basic education. And then there's also the law enforcement. So the law enforcement argument was the reason that, or the justification for imposing these the legal presence requirement, although it didn't address issues related to fraud of proof of residency, which was the initial problem. But the reality is actually a lot of evidence has come out suggesting that this is far worse for law enforcement on many levels. At the local level, it makes it harder for law enforcement to, there are more hit and runs because people are afraid or uninsured on the road. And also for police enforcement, it is harder to find people, contact people. There are plenty of implications if people are not registered in any public database and afraid of the police. And then if you go all the way to the national level, actually, DHS actually released an internal report that revealed ICE was actually dependent very much on local and state databases for dealing with threats of national security. And they found that they actually very much suffered from the legal presence laws for in DMVs because they lost so many databases. I mean, if you're worried about national security, if you just have some people who are just no longer captured. I mean, we're talking millions of people nationwide. We have hundreds of thousands in Virginia who are just not captured in the database. If they're really concerned about national security, it is not easier to monitor a national security threat if people are just not captured. So a lot of these arguments are now backed up with more and more findings, which is great. This means this is the moment, right? These bad laws and bad policies were adopted, but we have evidence which really make.
Work with the gentleman to publish the National Hispanic Scholarship Directory with over 1,000 sources of financial aid. We did this for 5 years during my tenure. 2 years ago, I've left that organization 10 years ago. 2 years ago, that same friend asked me if I would help him publish a Latino and American Indian National Scholarship Directory, and 3 months ago we came out with a publication, and I'll share some thoughts on that. But let me just mention to you that after I left that group, I took the job of working as executive director of the Shirlington Employment and Education Center, a day labor center in Arlington. And many of you know the Weenie Weenie, and you see all of these immigrants that are there looking for work. And that's demonstrating the immigrant story. The only thing that they're looking for is an opportunity to do well. And in Arlington, and some of us call Arlington the People's Republic of Arlington, we try to solve problems, and we don't do easy, as a former county manager said. We try to find ways of helping people. So for 9 years, I've been there as a director trying to find jobs. But 8 years ago, I became the chair of the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, Bacolao, and I followed in the footsteps of other Latino leaders advocating enrichment every year to present the face of the immigrants in Richmond before the legislators, many of whom have never seen any Latinos before, and yet they were putting all these bills that Alfonso talked about. One year we had over 60 anti-immigrant bills. Anything you could imagine that said immigrant, they would put it in. As you may know, Arizona and Alabama are not, they didn't create bills on their own. Those had already been attempted here in Virginia. This is literally where all the anti-immigrant sentiment grew, and then it spread throughout the country. But fortunately, for many years, we've had the opportunity of being able to kill many of these anti-immigrant bills in the Senate. And 8 years ago, there was a Senator Hanger, who happens to be a Republican, talked to a group of us. We were there to talk to oppose his bill that would deny undocumented immigrants the right to in-state tuition. And he called a group of us and said, how can we fix this bill to make it more reasonable? And several lawyers went to talk to him, including some of the folks you heard earlier here today, Claire Gastañaga and Tim Freilich, who's here, and others, to fix that bill to make it reasonable so that young people who are undocumented, whose parents have paid taxes for at least the last 3 years, who were in a process of becoming legal, or once they became eligible would do something that would give them an opportunity to move forward and to ultimately get in-state tuition. We talked to some of the Democrats in the Senate who told us, let's kill this bill, because once it goes over to the House, they're going to change the shape of that bill and come back here as a monster. We don't want to do it, let's kill it now. And we said, look, this is the first time we've had anybody talk to us in a positive way. We'd like to see this thing go through. So the Senate approved Senator Hanger's bill. It went over and it died. We made an appeal. We went to the subcommittee of higher education in the Assembly. We made an appeal to these people, and it was like talking to a stone wall. Some of us said undocumented, we represent undocumented. Some guys said, I don't want to hear the word undocumented in this room. He says, they're illegal aliens, and that's what else they remain. And Claire Gastañaga clarified to the gentleman that he was wrong as well. And we've had some experiences, and they leave some emotional scars. But the beautiful thing about it is when you have truth in your side, you cannot stop the fight. And when we're talking about our young people, and that's what we're talking about, is the future of our youth, opening up those doors, because ultimately they are going to become legal to one manner or the other. They're going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and the sooner we get them educated, the more beneficial, and the more skill they'll have to lead us properly in the future. But some of the things that we need to recognize is when we're dealing with people that are not like us, what we need to do is to present the arguments in a manner that is going to make sense to them, and that's the pocketbook. In the future, who's going to be providing the workforce in the Commonwealth and in this country, if not the immigrant? So doesn't it make more sense to have an educated workforce as opposed to having people who live, as they say, in the shadows all these years. And those are the people that ultimately are going to take over some jobs, ill-prepared to do it. And it just doesn't make any sense. So as time goes on, and thank goodness that President Obama put forth DACA and opened a pathway for these young people to become, to get some status here so that they can go to college. They're paying out-of-state tuition, and I'm sure my colleague is about to come before you and share some of the challenges that they still remain. But it's an opportunity not to fear of getting deported. And it's amazing, but even that, it's a major burden that has been removed. Now let me just, in closing, let me just tell you that the fight is still, it's not going to be won probably this year, although miracles have happened before. But regardless of when it comes, we will continue the fight, as Alfonso has indicated, to do that. So one of the things that I did, going back to what I shared with you about a scholarship directory, a friend of mine and I were able to publish the National Latino and American Indian Scholarship Directory, a publication that has over 1,900 sources of financial aid. And the reason it doesn't look like a phone book is because we have a CD back here with all the data. But we're going to be doing some activities in Northern Virginia to Latinos, having an event at the end of November for Latino seniors. And we're going to invite them and give them a free CD with all of these and help and provide a helping hand for financial aid. Just wanted to share that with you. It's been a privilege to be here, and thank you so very, very much for the work that you do. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you see me? A little short. Well, I'm Isabel. I am undocumented, I guess documented now because I've applied for deferred action. But originally from Mexico, my parents brought me here when I was 6 years old. I live in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And, you know, I'm one of millions of people in this situation where we were brought to this country when we were small. We didn't really have a choice to come here. And just grew up here. I started the first grade in the public school system in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And I guess I grew up knowing that I was undocumented, but I was too young, or I didn't really know what that meant until I was in high school. And this was specifically during my senior year in high school when a lot of my peers were talking about going to college, where they got accepted, where they were going. And my parents always instilled in my siblings and I to value education, to become someone professional in life. They worked in the poultry plants for many years, so they would always tell us, you don't want to have this type of work. You know, you're getting up really early in the morning, you're working with turkeys and blood and guts, like do well in school. So I worked hard throughout my school years. I had a 4.0 GPA as a senior, and so I went to go speak to my counselor and I said, I want to go to college, sign me up. But I don't think he had ever worked with anyone in my situation, so he didn't really know how to help me, or he didn't even know of any colleges or universities that would accept undocumented students. So it was a tough moment for me because I was ready to go to college, but I didn't know of any places. I didn't have a social security number, so I couldn't apply for loans, for federal financial aid, for grants. So after high school, I found a job as a waitress, and I worked there for a whole year, 7 days a week, from 9:30 till 10, and I did this every day for an entire year until finally I found out about a university that would accept undocumented students. So that was Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, and I enrolled, graduated in 3.5 years with a bachelor's in social work. But then, you know, I was at another stage of my life, much like the one in high school. Like, I have this degree, I can't work. But, you know, our education, nobody can take it away from us. And our parents sacrificed so much to bring us to this country. And they call us dreamers, but many of us say our parents are the original dreamers for sacrificing so much and leaving everything behind, their home country, their family. And so I'm very privileged in that sense to be able to have a college degree, because a lot of our youth don't have that opportunity. It's really expensive. And so I'm really happy that we have Delegate Lopez and so many people and supporters who are wanting to fight for in-state tuition, because that would really help thousands and thousands of youth in the state of Virginia. So that's just a little bit about my story. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions.
Hi, so if you guys will let me do a comment and a question. I'm Terry Angelotti, and I'm here with the Centerville Immigration Forum. We run a day labor center out in Centerville. But really, I'm at this workshop as a parent of 3 teenagers. And one issue that I think makes this a lot more complicated emotionally for people is that I see the other parents at back to school night and elsewhere, and they're so concerned about getting those spots at Virginia colleges for their kids because it's so competitive. And I worry that a lot of people, my neighbors, whoever, think that people like Isabel are taking a spot from their kid. And I believe that if Isabel has a higher GPA and SAT scores, then she deserves that spot, and mine doesn't. But I think that's pretty rare among parents. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up as sort of another layer that's not present in other immigration issues that we've been discussing, so that somehow that be addressed. And then my question is, what's being done on college campuses? Because I would like to see my son who's in college and his friends meet the dreamers and see those kids who are their peers, who are just as well qualified and don't have the opportunity they do. And the kids I'm thinking of are brand new voters, and I would love to see them mobilize on Virginia colleges throughout the state to speak up for their peers who aren't getting the same opportunities they are. So is anyone doing organizing on college campuses about this? I know you have the presidents involved, which is phenomenal, but do you have any students involved?
So I just started working with Virginia organizing a little bit, almost 2 months ago. But we do encourage people to get involved in college campuses. And actually tomorrow they're going to have this event in Charlottesville. Tim, I'm not sure if you know about this, but it's inviting the college students to come together to learn about organizing, to get organized in their campus, and including fighting for in-state tuition. So that's happening around the state, and it's also our job to plant that seed and let our students know that they can make a difference and they should organize on campus.
I'll speak to your comment and also your question. Latinos make up 8% of the population in Virginia. 5.6% of the population are documented naturalized citizens or citizens. 2.3% of the population of registered voters are Latino. 56% of Latino students know someone who's undocumented in high school. I have met George Mason University students, George Mason University Democrats, and then also the Umbrella Group, which is fairly sizable, of UVA students who are working on these kinds of issues, had worked on these kinds of issues in the past. I think it's interesting that, well, let me go back to your comment. Northern Virginians make up 25% of the student population at UVA and William & Mary. But we account for 17% of the high school graduates every year. When people tell me that, their kid can't get in because some undocumented student who's a valedictorian is taking their spot, and there's not any opportunities for Northern Virginians, that's hogwash. Excuse my French in this hallowed place. the numbers don't bear that out. All right.
I certainly can't come up with the statistics as well as Alfonso, but let me just share with you. There is a series of shows that's coming, WETA, on Latinos in America. I don't know if anybody has seen that, but it's fabulous stories. But some of the racism that you see in Miami with the influx of the Cubans coming in, all of a sudden people started saying they passed an English-only law in Florida, and then that sprouted up a number of other states throughout the country. I'm sure Virginia did too. But some people would say, this is America, speak English. But as one commentator, one Latino said, literally what they're saying is they don't want us here. And this notion, and the point that you made earlier is well taken, and that is that somebody says they're taking a spot from us. Who came up with that logic? As Alfonso said, Latinos may comprise 8% of the population, but what size or what percentage do we represent in the colleges? It doesn't even come close to 2%, I would believe. So it's not that we're taking something from somebody else. We're not given an opportunity to participate. But your question is very valid. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Javier Medina Vidal. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Virginia Tech. My colleague Elsa Camargo and I came up from Blacksburg last night to be with you all today. And just to answer the question about organizing on campuses, we are organizing on Virginia Tech's campus, and so we're representing that delegation here today. We had an event last week in Blacksburg on the campus in which Edgar Aranda was there present, talking to students, faculty, and staff about these issues. So it's happening in Blacksburg. We're here trying to get educated about what else can we do. I'll say this is my second year in Virginia, so I'm new to Virginia. I'm a new college professor. But these are issues that are very important to my students, right? Not to me personally, but to my students on the campus. So not having much of the background of the history of this legislation, I'd like to know what is it that we can do, that my students and I can do differently? What can we do more of or less of to help advance this legislation through the legislative process? Thank you.
Literally every single member of the state senate and the state house around Southwest Virginia, Blacksburg, Roanoke, up down the Shenandoah Valley, needs to hear from your students. They need to go and visit with them in their district offices. They need to send them letters, send phone calls, send emails, basically saying, where do you stand on the DREAM Act and why? And then, you'll get a form letter. You need to respond and say, your form letter said this. This is dribble. Why? And what I'm trying to do is present to every member of the House of Delegates, here's the demographic breakdown in your district. Here are examples of incredible students who are graduating from your high schools who are meeting a brick wall because we haven't passed this bill. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stand with me and pass this bill, or are you not going to stand with me and defeat this bill? And we need to reach out. If you have people organized in any part of the state, they need to be reaching out to their members in the House of Delegates now. Because now is when we're starting to lay the groundwork for what happens in January.
If I may just add, in addition, I guess, to correspondence, is a personal visit, especially with taking several students and their parents and sharing those stories with them. It's a long process. Some of these people have been saying no forever. They don't know what yes means. So it's going to take a lot. But, I was talking to Rick Castañeda, after a while. Yeah, but he was saying that one of the staunchest Republicans lives in his district, and some of the best friends of his son are undocumented immigrants, and they've appealed to him on that basis, bringing it home. I don't know how many years it's going to take for them to reconsider. But one of the things about Senator Hanger 8 years ago, when he asked us to change the bill to something that would open the door for these kids, what happened was that his son became engaged to a lady from the Philippines, and he got introduced to the Philippines. No, Philippines. That's the story I got was from the Philippines. And he got introduced into the immigration system, which is broken. You know, he found all these problems, and he says, "I realize now what some of the problems. It's in Washington. Let's see how we can make it change." It's going to take a long time, but the thing is, we can't just wait for it to happen. We have to nudge it along.
Is that guaranteeing like the same price, or would the price go up?
No, they're not eligible for any of the subsidies.
No, we understand, but is the actual full price?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
For Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the full price is the same.
Okay.
All health insurance companies are required to offer the same product in and outside of the exchange.
Okay.
So,
The same
yes.
price.
Oh.
So it's the same
Even
product.
if the person is undocumented.
I don't know about
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, because
it's
you
the same
can-
product. It's, you know, that's whatever's in the exchange.
You can
that
buy
product.
insurance without having to be documented right now.
Yeah.
They don't care as long as you pay, and the price is, the full price is the same.
Okay. Yes.
The penalty for not having insurance.
Yes.
I've had people come up to me and say, you know, I'm not making very much money, why should I get into this exchange? Why, I can just an emergency and have not paid.
Right, so the penalty, right, just to clarify, there is a penalty that you have to pay if you can't afford, if you don't get health insurance. It's, for next year, it's gonna be $95 per adult, $47.50 for a child, and no more than $280 for a family. However, there are exemptions to the penalty. Some of them, for example, are hardship. So if health insurance will cost more than 8% of your household income, then you're exempt from that penalty.
But
Yes.
what about people who sit there and say, okay, I'll pay the penalty of $85 because that is less than $52 a month, and it's also an emergency income. So how do I counsel?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that it's going to go up every year.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the first year, so it's not a very expensive penalty, no. But it's going to increase. For next year, it'll be more or 2% of your income. After that, it'll be 2.5% of your income. At no point in time ever, when it does reach its max, I've heard what they're going to do is it'll be the same price as the very lowest, cheapest thing you can buy insurance. So at some point, it's going to even out and be like, well, with insurance, it's probably the same with the penalty.
But even to add to that, I mean, the example like with John, without the cost sharing.
That's right.
He was only paying $57 a month. So if they're experiencing that much of a hardship, they're probably going to get a really good portion, you know, of it paid for, which would give them the incentive to get the coverage so that they can get the preventative care that they might need, so that we're not paying more on the back.
Exactly. Very nice way to express it. Yes, sir. Oh, yes.
You were actually in North.
Back to a case, if there's an undocumented person in the household that cannot apply, what kind of documentation will be required to show that that person is undocumented?
For someone who's not on the marketplace, I don't know what would be requested of us.
Someone this morning said that there would be documentation required. You can't just say they're not eligible.
Oh, you mean from the penalty?
That he will be non-eligible and have a documented person, so that they don't apply for the penalty. To prove that you're unlawful.
To prove that you're not.
There is a document that we do have access to, and I'll have to look at it again, but it has a listing of all the statuses, you know, legal, permanent resident, DACA, whatever, which statuses are eligible, which are ineligible, and the documentation that's required. So it's kind of a chart, nice chart format. So if I can get a hold of that, actually I may have it right on my computer.
Could you email it to us all?
I could email it, I think, if
To
we
everyone
want to start
who
a
signed
list
up?
of whoever would like.
Well, I mean the registration.
Yeah, if you want that, if you can give me your your contact information, then I'll make sure to get that to you.
I had the same thought, or I think a similar question came to the other one. I kept asking the question, do undocumented immigrants, do they pay taxes? And my thought is a no. So I think the question, kind of the opposite side of the spectrum of the question you might want to ask is, who is documented? Because they said that in order to count a household size, they're looking at the people that are on your taxes. So let's say all three of us live together and you're undocumented. She would be on my taxes. Let's say she's my daughter. So that would be my household size. You would still be undocumented because you're undocumented. So I would ask the question from the perspective of who's documented instead of how do we prove who's undocumented in the household.
I mean, I guess my question is, a lot of our clients that don't have documents pay taxes through a report. And so if they're in that family and do that, we need to submit their income also as part of that.
Everyone who's in the household, yeah, is calculated, their income is calculated. Yes.
Do you have this information in different languages?
That's in Spanish back there. All right. But that is, okay, that's, you better have that, so you can ask her afterwards where she got it.
Let's say that I want to become a counselor.
Yes.
Where is the training?
You can go back there and ask more questions. You can email them, and they'll give you all the information. There's a sign-in sheet back there, or an email address. Yes. Or sorry, you had one. Sorry.
Yeah. Two questions. If you get the subsidized insurance, are you paying your monthly to the government, or are you paying?
Excellent. Yes. Great question. You pay your first premium payment to the marketplace. Every time after that, you're paying your premium to the insurance company.
Okay. What is there going to be any problem if the government is kind of gets overloaded and doesn't pay in a timely manner, in a nasty letter?
You're not getting a nasty letter. They know what's going on. Your insurance company is working with the government, so they know what's happening.
One other question. For example, hypothetical second lowest silver plan.
Right.
What kind of maximum out of pocket does that have?
So there's in the Healthcare Act for everyone, it's $6,300 for an individual and $12,000 approximately for a family. But they might be lower in some of the plans. So like you were saying, how everything's going to be mapped out deductible, that one should also be included in there as well. So some will even might have lower total out-of-pocket expenses, but the government is captive as well. Yes, these last 30, and then we're going to wrap up.
So if a family right now is paying insurance,
yes,
exorbitant,
yes,
and they want to go to one of these plans,
yes,
they can actually go cancel. Do they cancel?
Well, part of it depends if it's an employer. If they didn't include their employer, or is they just purchasing on their own?
Just purchase on their own.
Yeah, they can go on here and they can cancel their own. Yes. Yes. Yes.
For those who have tax ID numbers who are undocumented, what, if anything, changes when they go file a tax time?
I'm not sure. I know you're not supposed to put that number on the marketplace. I do know that.
Right. But will they have to do anything different for filing their taxes, or will tax accountants be aware?
I'm not sure. It's probably different. I don't look that up.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
So they're not getting penalized.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want them to get that.
So we don't know.
Okay. Can I get your question?
I know you guys trying to explain the Medicaid gap.
Do you guys want to know about the Medicaid gap really quick in 1 minute?
Yes.
Okay, so the Medicaid gap, if you guys have heard about this, is when the Affordable Care Act was passed. What the entire act encompassed was said, we're going to give people subsidies between 100% and 400%, or 100 to 200%. And everyone below 100%, what would happen to them? They would be eligible for Medicaid. Medicaid would be expanded. Here in Virginia, we're like ranked 47 in the country of who's eligible for Medicaid. A lot of times just children, pregnant women, aged, blind, and disabled. Medicaid would have expanded. If Medicaid was expanded, it would include childless adults, just they're able based solely on their income. However, when the Health Care Act went to the Supreme Court declared that the Medicaid expansion, so making Medicaid more eligible for people, was a state option, and Virginia has chosen not to expand Medicaid to allow more people to enroll in the process. Does that kind of make sense? Okay.
We're going to have to wrap up.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll be here. We have another session that's following this, but my information, I think that
remember that she said that we can sign a book right now. Like she, that is not anywhere. Send an email, community. I'm feeling a lot better.